Welcome to Church 180. My name is Tony, and I'm excited that you're here. Round 2 today. Last time for round 2 for a little bit of time as we go into summer schedule next week. But hey, I am excited to bring this message to you. But let me catch you up real quick on where we've been so you understand where we're going today. Week 1, okay? Week 1. We said this. We said that you are either being formed into whatever Southern California is forming you into, which is right here, or you're being formed into the image of Jesus. This is easy. You just do what everybody else does around you. You do what you think's going to make you happy. You just, you just whatever. Like, this is this. Over here, if you want to be formed in the image of Jesus, we talked about, it is going to be the fight of your life. Like, you are going to need what we called a rule of life, meaning you're going to need a set of rhythms, a set of practices that help you to be formed. And so we're in this series, Clay, we're talking about your life in formation. And honestly, spiritual formation is the more ancient word of what we've kind of used for a while as discipleship. And now we're back to using the more ancient word of spiritual formation. It's to be formed in the image of Jesus. And we said in week 1, this is hard. You need a rule of life. Week 2, we said, when did we get away from the picture of Jesus being the picture of human flourishing? Like, we, in our culture, this 21st century, 20th century, whatever, we have looked to Jesus for forgiveness. We've looked to Jesus for atonement from our sins, is the churchy word that's here. We've looked to Jesus for hope and good feelings and all this stuff, but we've forgotten that he is God as a human being who came to this earth and showed us a better way. And here we are over here like, oh, I think this is going to make me happy. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this. And we're like, when do we get away from like looking to the Son of God, Jesus, God himself in the flesh, in the way that he lived his life in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? When do we get away from this as the picture of what it means to be a human being and to have a happy, satisfied, fulfilling, joyful life? Like, when do we get away from this and just look to him for forgiveness? And that's what we said in week 2. Week 3, we got a little more practical. We got up here, we started talking about our morning routines and how we're either going to, from the first step that we get out of bed in the morning, we're either going to set ourselves up into the reality of living as a child of God, or we're going to set ourselves up into the illusion that the world throws at us, that the culture throws at us. And we will live out of those lies depending on how we start our day. And then we got up here and we talked about how formational that your mealtime is. And that's fallen on hard times in our culture, right? Where we're just like, hey, let's just give the kids a screen or give the kids whatever. And we're all moving at whatever pace. And you got to go here and you got to go here. And we got to organize and juggle and do all this stuff. And then we get away from the fact that, man, as families, we were created to sit around a table together more often than we oftentimes do. And share a meal and conversation and relationships with each other. We're meant to be in community with our church family. We're meant to be in community with our neighborhoods and our friends and all these things and to share meals together. And this is part of our formation because Jesus himself did that. That's what he did. We got up here, Lee got up here. We're jumbling the schedule as I'm going to talk about today. Lee got up here last week, our coach at Church 180, our staff coach, and he had May 5th available, and he wanted to talk about our private life, our interior world, and how it's within our private life, our inner life, that we will get the strength that we need to actually live a public life. But so often in our 21st century culture, we're like Instagram, Facebook, whatever, like TikTok, whatever, and we have a public life, but we forget that our inner life is rotting for many of us. And we realize that it's in our interior world, it's in our inner life that we get the strength and the tools with which to live our public life, that we get everything we need there. And Lee got up here and talked about that last week. I did a little gymnastics in the schedule to get the topic that I wanted to get for Mother's Day today, right? Today, we're going to be talking about formation in work. Y'all ready? Formation in work. And I know immediately when I say work, you're thinking like, oh, my job, I hate my job, whatever. We're gonna unpack a much more robust, like here's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna talk about the theology. Theology is a big church word that just means the study of God, okay? And so we're gonna talk about the theology of work. And we're going to look at it holistically. I was sharing some of this with my wife last night, and I was saying it could be said that moms work the hardest. And she looked at me and she goes, it should be said that moms work the hardest. And so we'll start with that. And I know for me, like, we want to celebrate moms today around here. That's why we had, Mom, You're the Bomb bath bombs. I was making a joke in first service, and somebody actually took them out of the laundry basket. I said, hey, they just kind of fit in a laundry basket that we had in the office. This is not a sign, okay? Moms, this is not a sign to go do laundry. That's not what we're trying to say. But somebody took them out of the laundry basket and arranged them nice and neatly out there. And you can grab one if you didn't already. This is why we had the photo opportunity, and we had brunch today that was delicious because we want to celebrate moms there. I know that my wife, Kelsey, works tirelessly to make sure that our kids have everything they need and experience everything that we think that they need and should experience. We were talking last night about a little bit of this at the beginning of the message, Kelsey and I were, and we were reminded of whenever we were first launching Church 180, back a few years back, and we were at the pool with some friends and who also had, quite a few kids and stuff, and the girl looked over to Kelsey and she just said, how in the world do you not lose it on your kids all the time and freak out? And that was honestly one of the most humbling and cool questions, and we got to be on her spiritual journey with her and her family as a result of some of that. But really, quite frankly, it comes down to what we're going to talk about today. Because Jesus wants to form each and every single one of us. And like what we're going to talk, the first point, if you're following along, I might as well let the cat out of the bag. Work is one of the primary ways that we look more like Jesus. Work is one of the primary ways that Jesus gets a hold of our lives and forms us. And without using big spiritual preachy words and stuff like that, it's like Kelsey and I were able to talk to her and just be like, hey, you know what? Like, Jesus is forming us. And we still do freak out on our kids. So don't, whatever. Just being transparent. We do. Because, right, we all do, unless you're perfect, whatever. You could leave our church then. But we like to think that, we're being formed into that, into the image of Jesus. And so when it comes to being a mom, when it comes to everything that we're going to talk about in this robust theology of work today, it's under the banner that work is one of the most formational things we can do, and work in and of itself is one of the primary ways that we look more like Jesus. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be in 3 books in the Bible today, 4 different passages. I wish we were in a whole lot more. So we're going to do a little bit of a Bible study to do our theology of work today. We're going to be in the book of Genesis chapter 2, if you want to turn there. I was saying this to first service, and I'm still going to say this. Like, there's a reason. I could put the scriptures on my iPad, but I wholeheartedly recommend the paper Bible. Because if you're like me, you go to YouVersion on your phone, and you open up your Bible, and then all of a sudden you get a text message or a notification or something, and you flip over, and you're like, what was I doing? Right? And that's me. And so it's for free. But we're going to be in Genesis chapter 2 to start. And we're going to read verses 1 through 3 and then verse 15, okay, to start our little place in the theology of work. This is what it says, Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. And by the 7th day, God had finished the work he'd been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all of his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all of the work of creating that he had done. And so we see this play back and forth between God working and then resting, right? And then you jump down to verse 15 and it says this. It says, the Lord God took man and put him on the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. So right there, Genesis chapter 2, second page of the Bible, we see a God who creates everything you've ever seen, and then he takes a break. He works and then he rests. And then right there in verse 15, it says he created human beings. He created you and I. And he said, hey, get to work, right? That's like the first thing he says when he creates you and I. He's like, hey, go get to work. And we see that. And then, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. That's the Old Testament version of what's going on here. And I feel like I need to say this just so that everybody kind of starts to understand a little bit. But the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 2, was written specifically to three religions that populate the earth today, like of which there's Christianity, which we are here as a result of. There's Judaism, which did not take Jesus for who it is. And then there's Islam, and they all look back to this same theology of work that came from the beginning, right? All of these religions. So if we jump then to the New Testament, where we stand in the camp that we sit in, because we believe that Jesus was God, that he lived the perfect life, he died, was buried, and rose from the dead, and that he is showing, he's the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And so when we look at this through Jesus' lens, we go to Colossians chapter 1, okay? And so jump to Colossians chapter 1 with me. And this is what it says, verse 15. It's not going to be on the screen, but it says, the Son, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all of creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Do you know what the Apostle Paul's doing here? He's writing this letter. Jesus has died. He's been buried. He's risen from the dead. The early church has started. And there's a church that Paul helped plant that's in the city of Colossae, which is in modern-day Turkey at the time. And he's writing back to this church. And he says, do you know the Genesis 2 account that you know really well? Boys and girls, you know the Genesis 2 account? You know that? Jesus was there. He was there and he was doing it. And everything that you've ever seen and everything from that Old Testament account in Genesis, everything about that, it was created through Jesus and it was created for Jesus. That's what the Apostle Paul is telling the church in Colossae, which he's also vicariously telling you and I, 21 centuries later, right? Or 20 centuries later. And so it's Jesus right there. And interestingly enough, God says, the first thing he says is get to work. And then we see Jesus is in the story. And it's no surprise then that work is one of the primary ways that you and I start to look more like Jesus. Because if you read Genesis, if you read Matthew, you read Mark, you read Luke, and you read John, you get the 4 accounts of the life of Jesus. And in those 4 accounts, you start to see the rhythm of Jesus' life. And there's 3 things that Jesus dedicated his entire life to. 3 things. Number 1, work, right? Started as a carpenter. Then he started his mission at the age of 30 that God had given him to preach and teach and to heal. And so we see Jesus continuously work with his hands and to do that. Number 2, we talked about it last week. We see Jesus, he mesmerizes people through his teaching and through his healing. And there was an abundance of work for him. If he was like many of us, broken, whatever people, he would have never stopped working because people never stopped needing him. Crowds flocked to him. People expected things from him. People always wanted more from him. And what did he do? Because he was limited as a human being, God in the flesh, he withdrew. So he worked, and then he withdrew. And he got his interior life right. He rested. He took a break from all the work. He got away, and he spent time with the Father. And that's what we see. He worked, he rested, and then what's number 3? We talked about it a few weeks ago. He was accused of being a drunkard and a glutton because he spent so much time partying with people, right? He was always at the dinner table, hanging out, sharing a meal, spending time with people in community. That's all we see from the life of Jesus. We see work, we see rest, and we see community. And here we are 21 centuries later, and we think that we have ways of making ourselves happy, and like we're going to do this and buy this and go here and whatever. And all of a sudden, and we're like, man, when did we stop looking at the picture of human flourishing? Because I don't know how I want to phrase it. Try work, try rest, try community if you're looking for meaning and happiness. Try those 3 things. Because that's what we see from the life of Jesus and the rhythms that he had in that. See, the next chapter of Genesis is where we see that things go wrong, right? Because of the disobedience of Adam and Eve, because of sin entering the world, we have what's called the fall of humanity. And what we learn from the fall is that there's always going to be more work to do. Right? I wrote it this way in my notes. There's always going to be more dishes to wash. There's always going to be more floors to sweep and vacuum. There's always going to be more food to shop for and cook. There's always going to need to be more dishes to be done, housework to be done, emails to answer, proposals to put together, calls to make, events to plan, projects to finish, kids to transport, kids to do whatever for, kids to wipe their butts. There's always going to be more of it. And that's part of the fall. We live in a world where it's like, you could literally not stop working and not get it all done. That's part of the world that we live in and stuff. And I wanted to put it this way, if you're following along on your note sheet, we end up making a life out of the work that comes into our lives, right? It's essentially our life, is we make a life out of the work that comes into our life, that we allow or is put on us. Whether that be the house that we rent or buy, whether that be the family that we choose to create or adopt, or the animals that we have, right? You know, because we have our dog is nearing the end. He's about 40. He's like 90. He's approaching 100 in dog years. And animals are work, y'all. He's becoming a lot of work again because he's like losing control of his bladder and all this stuff. And we're like talking, we're like, man, our kids probably are going to need a puppy, but I'm not sure we're ready for the work of a puppy. Looking back to that, right? I'm not ready. I'm not sure we're ready. It's whether the children, the animals, the jobs that we pursue, these things become our life, and we make our life out of the work that we pursue with these, the work that these things require. Justin Whitmore Earley, who wrote Habits of the Household that we've been talking about, the attorney that wrote this, he said, so work is not just a way to make the ends of life meet. Work is better understood as an end that makes meaning of life. I thought that was good, right? I thought that was good. I remember for me, and I shared this story, and it dates me a little bit for you younger people in here. But I remember for me, I picked up a golf habit when I was in about 6th, 7th grade. And I loved to play. But as you know, golf isn't cheap. And, you know, I watched Happy Gilmore, right? Happy Gilmore came out, and I was hooked, right? Started with the step up and then turned into one of those guys where he said if I wore shorts like that, never mind. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And so I picked up this golf habit, and my parents were like, hey, we're not paying for this golf all the time, but you can mow the yard, and we'll let you play one round a week for the yard, which eventually evolved into doing our yard, and then my next-door neighbor's yard, and then my on the other side next-door neighbor's yard. And I still remember I got hooked on it because, like, whenever I mowed for the first time, just the smell of that fresh-cut grass, right? And like the satisfaction of seeing it all nice and short and clean and tidy, I got obsessed. I started like cutting in patterns, trying to make it look like a golf course or like a baseball diamond or something like that. And I started to just like take a lot of pride in that. And then it turned into a job for me, because this was back in the days before, you know, social media or any of the marketing or anything you would do. And so I got out a piece of paper, you know, like copy paper. I wrote, we'll mow your yard, something like that. And then I did the old paper strips, right? You write your number 10 times, and then you put a little cut in there so that people can look at it on a community board, rip off your phone number, call you. And I got a lot of yards to do as a young little 6th, 7th grader or whatever. I'm walking around my small town of 900 people with my mower like, you know, just like walking and stuff. And it began that business for me that I found a lot of satisfaction in from a job well done. And I think about that, and I think, you know, I'm going to say this, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, I think, but I think work is one of the primary ways that we experience pleasure. Okay? And we're going to keep going, so if you disagree with me right now, just hang in there. But I think work is one of the primary ways that we experience pleasure. Now I need you to turn to Ecclesiastes with me if you have a paper Bible. If you don't, then your phone. It's fine. Let me set this up for you for a second. Solomon is the most successful person ever, okay? If you think you're successful, he's much more successful than you. I was talking about it with somebody this morning. We're like, okay, gosh, every time Ohtani gets up to bat this afternoon, he's going to make $100,000 for that at bat, okay? Every time Manny Machado gets up to bat, he's probably going to make $62,500 every time he steps up to the plate to bat. And Solomon made them look like children in their wealth, in their prosperity, in their stuff. Solomon built a kingdom and was one of the most successful people that ever walked this planet. He had 1,000 women. He anything that he could have, he had. Anything, he says, chapter 2, he says, anything that I wanted, I just had. All the things that we think are going to make us happy, he had them. He had them. And we're going to do a deep, in-depth dive into the book of Ecclesiastes starting in the month of August. I can't wait. One of my favorite books. Very sobering. And we're going to go through that verse by verse, starting in August. But I gotta read out of the Pinnacle. This is what Solomon writes, Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And this is after the pleasure chapter, where he says he withheld from himself nothing, had all the pleasure. And he writes this, he says, what do workers gain from all their toil? I've seen the burden that God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. That is his way of saying, do you ever feel like there should be more to life? He put that in your heart. Do you ever feel like there should be something else? There should be like more meaning? He put that in you. That's what he's saying. He said he set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end, meaning that you're not going to get a lot about your life while you live it here. That's what he's saying. And he says, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. That each of them, you and me, may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift of God. Y'all, this is essentially, I mean, let's be honest, Jeff Bezos, super wealthy. I don't know. I mean, I've read enough about Solomon. Like Jeff Bezos is a little bit of a train wreck. This is the most successful person ever. The guy that died with the most toys. And he says, you know what? You know what's going to make you happy in life? Eating, drinking, and working. That's about all you got. You got a few years on this planet, so eat, drink, and work. That's what he says. I mean, I'm sorry to make it crass and simple theology here, but he's like, yo, you got a short time on this planet. You might as well eat up, drink up, go to work. That's the Bible. And I think work is one of the primary ways that we receive pleasure. But here's the thing. And this is the point and this is the tension that you and I live in on planet Earth. Work can contribute or rob of dignity, right? It can contribute or rob of dignity. See, I put it this way. Now we need a paycheck, but we were created for so much more than a paycheck, right? Like you need to make money, but you're created for so much more than money. You need, you need some hobbies. Like it's great that you have a hobby, but the contrast of this is that we can't expect our hobbies to give us a paycheck, right? That's the other tension. Like I think we live in like the 21st century, and so we all think we can find what we love to do and make a ton of money for it and stuff like that as a result of it. And it's like, well, hold on, there's a contrast here. You need a paycheck, but you're not living for a paycheck, and you need to find meaning and joy and satisfaction in your work, but it may not be your hobby, right? When you do it, which is a hard tension to live in and a hard balance, and our culture doesn't make it easy, right? Whenever, this is going to date me a little bit, but 2010, right, when Bruno Mars wrote the Lazy song. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I'm not going to sing it. It's going to be terrible. I don't feel like doing anything. I just want to lay in my bed. Sounds great for a day. Make a life out of it, and you're going to be miserable. Right? Today I don't feel like doing anything. I just want to lay in my bed. I'm picking up the phone. Whatever. But you have the lazy song, and then you have over here, and we're a small enough church I can do this now. Over here you got Timu, right? Okay? Shop like a billionaire. You got Bruno Mars talking about, like right after that song, right before, he's like, I just want to be a billionaire, right? I can't sing the next line. This is church, y'all. And then over here you got Timu, and it's like, shop like a billionaire, right? I know I go here maybe a little bit too often, and you probably like, Tony, stick to being a pastor. But over here at Timu World, over here at Amazon World, over here at whatever world, y'all, like, we're not this big imperialistic country that goes and colonizes the world anymore, like Europe and, some of the whatever. But you know what we do? Starting in the 1980s, well, probably even a little bit before that with globalization, we export slavery all over the world through stuff like that. And there are little kids that are in factories sewing their fingers to the bone so that you can go to TJ Maxx or Temu or whatever the heck and you can get your cheap shirt, right? There are people being robbed of their dignity all over the planet so that we can drink our Folgers, right? And we can have our cheap coffee. And it's like, I'm not trying to be persnickety or fancy or expensive or whatever, but I'm saying we live in a time internationally where work is either contributing to our dignity or it's robbing people, human beings created in the image of God, of their dignity, right? It's not just a U.S. thing, it's a worldwide thing, right? Specifically in the garment industry, the coffee industry, certain things like that, there are people that have no dignity, no life outside of what they do that is being robbed by a middleman so that they're stuck in slavery and that's their only thing in life, is to do those jobs and to work. And so it's of course we're confused about our perspective of the theology of work, because over here we're singing the lazy song while we're buying a $9 shirt and calling it a bargain. you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to make the message all about that, so don't hear me. I'm going to get off the little soapbox there, and I'm going to bring this back to work can either contribute to or rob you of your dignity. It can. And it's doing that all over planet Earth today. It's contributing to or robbing of our dignity. See, let's jump to the positive side of things for a second, right? We, last September, I had the opportunity to take my 10 and my 8-year-old daughters to Montana on a mission trip. And we did some work for some nonprofits there in Montana, in Kalispell, and we did some work with a church that we've helped partner with and contribute to there in Kalispell. We have another trip coming up that some of our high school kids are going to be going on to do some of this similar work there. But I got to take my 10 and 8-year-old, and we were working with some nonprofits. We were painting. We were picking up poop and rearranging some farm stuff at this place. And I just remember, like, just the community that we had with the people on the trip, but then also, like, my 10 and 8-year-old, man, they've done a few chores. Kelsey has a little chores chart for them that's, like, hangs on her wall. But they hadn't done much work, like, real work, like, for more than, like, 10 minutes at a time, right? And so here they are out in Montana, like, working their butts off all day. And I remember, sometime in the afternoon, they get super tired, and they're just like, Dad, I'm so tired, I'm so hungry, can we eat anything? And like they're actually eating what's in front of them and not crying about it because they're actually hungry from a hard day's work. And I remember them just telling me at night, we'd get back to our little camper that we stayed in, and they were just so happy. They were so happy. Because there's something about work that contributes to our dignity. It does. There's something about it. It can rob us of our dignity or it can contribute to our dignity. But when we take the scriptures holistically, we start to see that God created us to work, and it should be a thing that contributes to our dignity. And the final point is this, and this is what it's going to say. I'm going to read a passage to reinforce this point, but it's this, is work is one of the primary ways that we love God through loving others. Okay? Work is one of the primary ways that we love God through loving others. It's not going to be on the screen. I'm going to talk about a passage before I go to the passage that we're going to go to. But 1 John chapter 4, very foundational verse, I think, in all of the scriptures, written by the Apostle John, who was close with Jesus. And he writes this reflecting in later years of life. It's estimated that he's in his 70s, living on house arrest. And he writes this letter back to the churches, 1 John chapter 4. And he says this, he says, anyone who claims to love God yet hates their brother is a liar. That's what he says. I mean, he says a lot more in the chapter, but he says anyone who claims to love God yet doesn't love the people around them is not telling the truth. Because one of the primary ways that we get this reinforced throughout all the New Testament, one of the primary ways that we love God is through loving the people that he puts in our path. And one of the primary ways that we love God is through loving others, right? And work is part of that. Work is one of those things, whether it be your household and you're a mom, whether it be your kids and you're a grandparent, whether it be your community, whether it be this church, whether it be your day job, desk job, labor job, whatever kind of job, work is one of the primary ways that you get to express that love that you have for God. It just is. And if you don't believe me and you're thinking, oh, pie in the sky, whatever, let's see what the Apostle Paul had to say to the church in Colossae about this. Colossians chapter 3. Let me get back. Oh, I lost my place. Give me a second. Bear with me. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Got that from my childhood song. Okay. It's all of chapter 3 you should read. I'm going to read 24 and 25. That's all I'm going to read. You should read all of it. Because I was trying to find my place earlier, and I was like, well, that says it too. That says it too. And I kept saying that. But 24 and 25 says this. It says, 23 and 24, sorry. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Crystal clear. Make no mistakes. When you go to your job, when you report to 32nd Street if you're in the Navy tomorrow, you're not working for your commanding officer, you're working for Jesus. That's what it says. When you show up to, your teaching job tomorrow, you're not just working for your principal or your superintendent or the children that are there or their parents that complain or love you or whatever. You are working for Jesus in that classroom. He's your boss, right? When you show up to your work, you're working for Jesus. When you show up to your family this afternoon and you're doing dishes, and maybe you hate dishes, or you're doing laundry, which I don't do because I'm bad at it and I hate it. And I told Kelsey early in our marriage, I'll do anything but laundry, anything. But when you show up and you're doing household chores, you're working for Jesus, right? When you show up to play with your grandkids, you're working for Jesus. When you show up to set up, tear down, hospitality, Greek, cafe, production, band, whatever, you're not working for this church. You're not working for me. You're working for Jesus. That's what the scripture says. And so the theology of work is that, work, it can contribute to or rob us of our dignity. It's one of the primary ways that we look like Jesus. It's so foundational to our formation. And it just says that when you put your hands to something, do it with everything you got because you're doing it for God in the end. And so I wrote it this way, in kind of conclusion. Ben, you guys can go ahead and come on up. But this is true with our employers, it's true with our coworkers, it's true with our employees, it's true with our society, whether you're paid from taxpayer dollars or whether you're paid from other institutional dollars. This is true with our spouse, this is true with our children. Moms, this is true with you, and this is your day. This is true with our neighbors, it's true with our communities, and it's true with our church, y'all. It just is. It's the way God set it up. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to try to bridge a fairy tale gap, but let's be honest. We're going to step into communion right now. And communion is a thing we do each week here. And in it, we remember the work that Jesus did, right? We are about to take a little juice. We're about to take a little cracker. it's back there on the tables. The juice represents the body or the blood of Jesus that spilled out. The cracker represents the body of Jesus that was broken and the work that he did on the cross in giving his life away so that we could gain it. And there's something just profound about that whenever Jesus then commands us as his followers not to go die. I mean, plenty of people have, but he commands us to take up our cross and to follow him, which is honestly a symbolic way of saying, get to work for the people in your life. That's what it means. It's pretty simple. It's pretty, the essence of it is there are people in your life you need to go to bat for. There are people in your life you need to go to work for. Take up your cross and follow me. And love me through loving the people around you. And work is one of the primary ways that you're going to do that. So Jesus, I pray for this time of communion right now. I pray that we can reflect on the work that you did on the cross, Lord, and that we can be inspired for the work that you have before us. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.